It's Darkness Falls on our 31 spooky movies of Halloween. Oh, it seems like it's been a year since we've done this because it's been a year. But we are back and we're talking about scary movies that you might have missed or in some cases, probably should have. And this week we have Darkness Falls, a nifty little tale of a kind old woman who dies and comes back for blood. You know, quite honestly, this is a movie whose concept is solid, whose execution is almost there, but nothing else works. The concept of a spook that can only get you if you're in the dark is fascinating, and the idea that a man has to live his entire life surrounded by lights because he's been marked by this entity for death is tragic. And I really wish this movie had explored it a little bit more than the first 15 minutes. But no, like most of the story beats in this movie, they're introduced as fascinating concepts, and then nothing more. Darkness Falls seems to me like a misguided attempt by a studio to create a horror movie, but at the same time make something that was marketable in less than 90 minutes. If you have the DVD to this movie, why? But if you do have the DVD to this movie, check out the deleted scenes. Why? Because that's where the best scene in the movie went. Now, I'm not going to lie. Darkness Falls does have some good scenes in it. The first 10 minutes are spectacular. And the rest of the movie is a spectacular waste of a concept. But sometimes an interesting concept does elevate a movie, and in this case, Darkness Falls is elevated by a concept. It lets the concept completely down, but the concept is a good one, and I do believe that if there was a candidate for a movie to be remade the right way, this movie is it. Plus, Darkness Falls has Emma Caulfield, and I love Emma Caulfield. Darkness Falls. It's not great, but it's also not great. But the concept is. So if you like good concepts with disappointing movies, what's wrong with you? You know what? Give it a look. Yes, Darkness Falls is trash. But it's trash in one of those bags that smells like lavender or lemon. It smells nice, but you know there's nothing but trash on the inside. And that is why Darkness Falls is our first 31 spooky movies of Halloween. It's The Changeling, part of our 31 spooky movies of Halloween. If you're someone who likes a good old-fashioned slow burn haunted house movie, then my friend, The Changeling, is for you. In it, the great George C. Scott plays a writer who, after an unimaginable tragedy, self-exiles to a remote manor to work on his novel. But while there, he discovers that he's not alone, and this strange paranormal force compels him to solve a decades-old mystery. The Changeling is a very slow, thoughtful, and confident movie. It takes time to get to where it's going. That may sound bad, and some people may say that the pacing is glacial, but the very, very talented George C. Scott's acting talents manages to fill any void that you might fill. And when this story gets going, the atmosphere gets heavier, the story gets more compelling, and the scares get scarier. By the time this movie reaches its climax, you will see that The Changeling is a true horror classic and more than deserving of its place in our 31 spooky movies of Halloween. This is the Ouija, origin of evil, on 31 spooky movies of Halloween. It's been a general rule of mine that I don't talk sequels or prequels until I talk about the original movie, so here are my thoughts on 2014's Ouija. It was crap. Well, now that that's out of the way, let's talk up 2016's Ouija, origin of Evil. A much, much better movie. As a matter of fact, from this point on, I no longer acknowledge that the original movie even took place. That faint farting sound that you're hearing is the sound of that dreadful movie squeezing out of the colon of existence and into the toilet bowl of nothingness. Origin of Evil is everything that the other movie that doesn't exist and never has wasn't. It has characters you care about, a story that is interesting, and surprisingly, and best of all, it's actually scary, with imagery and concepts that stick with you. I, for one, am shocked that this movie, which has never had a previous installment, managed to be this amazing on its own. How did a prequel to a horrible, forgettable, and unexistent horror movie manage to be so great? Ouija, Origin of Evil, is suspenseful, terrifying, and wonderfully acted, and beautifully shot. This is the proverbial daisy growing out of a cow pie, and if the stink of a certain stale, boring, and imaginary film has kept you away from seeing it all these years, you should really think the direction that your life has gone in. You should watch it on its own. It has serious merit and more than earned its place on this list of 31 spooky movies of Halloween. Evil. This is Tucker and Dale versus Evil on our 31 spooky movies of Halloween. We've seen a lot of movies that attempt to turn a genre on its head, but only a few of them actually do. Tucker and Dale vs. Evil is one of those movies. A movie that reverses the hillbilly horror film into one of misunderstandings, mayhem, and a complete reversal of the villain-victim archetype. What I like most about this film is that it doesn't try to be any more intelligent than it actually is. It's not trying to break new ground. It's not trying to reinvent the wheel. It's just trying to tell a horror movie from a different point of view. A point of view we've never seen before and quite frankly would have never expected. Tyler Labane and Alan Tudyk. Tyler Labane and the guy from Firefly absolutely shine as the title pair, a couple of optimistic and simple, sweet backwoods fellas who are just trying to live their lives and do the right thing until their day is completely messed up by some ignorant, judgmental city kids. Honestly, how this movie hasn't become a hit with the conservative crowds is beyond me. Tucker and Dale vs. Evil is a hilarious horror send-up that, despite the violence, never comes off as mean-spirited. As a matter of fact, this movie is like a live-action cartoon where deaths are accidental and the result of the character's only stupidity. You almost expect them to put a thumb in their mouth and go and make themselves whole again. Let me put it this way, if you like comeuppance and karma, this movie is for you. The core of this movie really is just about not judging someone before you meet them. As a result, this movie makes the hillbillies the victims, and a couple of characters go on a journey of self-acceptance. It is that extra depth to the story and the development of these characters that make this film worthy of joining our 31 spooky movies of Halloween. This is Clown on our 31 spooky movies of Halloween. If you hate clowns, this is not going to be the movie for you. Well, let's face it, even if you like clowns, this is probably not going to be the movie for you. Straight talk, this is probably not the movie for you at all. Are you scared of clowns? Evil, man-eating demon clowns? Well, who wouldn't be? But can that fear maintain an entire movie about a man-eating demon clown? Let's find out. When a devoted dad dons a dapper clown costume for his son's birthday party, he discovers, much to his horror, that the costume is cursed. He can't get it off, and it is slowly consuming him and turning him into a killer clown, not unlike the ones from outer space. This movie has a man being slowly transformed into an evil child-killing clown thanks to a cursed costume, but to me the biggest stretch is that he has a son who actually wants a clown at his birthday. Who actually wants a clown at their birthday? If you ask me, the kid is the real psycho. Okay, take a step back. This movie is pretty original and very well executed. While the story is not what I would call Shakespeare, it takes the killer clown genre and melds it inventively into the demon possession genre to give us a messed up, mashed up, the likes that we've never seen before. Not to mention that Clown's atmosphere is every bit as dark as its humor. I kinda like that Eli Roth makes movies whose trailers look like the fake trailers from Grindhouse. The man doesn't give a flip, and I kinda like him for that. I also have to give serious accolades to Andy Powers, who plays the man who becomes clown-possessed. He plays the part with such earnestness that you like his character, and you hate seeing his descent into becoming a monster. All you can do is sit there helplessly and watch this ridiculous situation consume him. Before he, starts consuming kids. Clown. It's a moronic idea executed with a smirk and a wink in a very original way, and while it's still flawed and has an underwhelming ending, it's more than worthy of being one of our 31 spooky movies of Halloween. This is The Others on our 31 spooky movies of Halloween. The Others isn't exactly obscure or little known, but I feel that we're entering an era where people don't know it as well as they should, which is a shame, because you rarely find a movie so methodically assembled, so beautifully shot, and so magnificently paced as The Others, a true horror masterpiece and chilling example of filmmaking. Nicole Kidman plays a woman in the 1940s, keeping the proverbial home fires lit at her sprawling estate while her husband fights the Great War. Her children are allergic to light, and so the home must be shrouded in all-encompassing darkness at all time. It's a cold and lonely life, but things get truly chilling as 3 servants are hired to tend to the grounds, and strange things begin to happen. This movie is a masterpiece of pacing. Rarely do you find a film that starts so slowly and then builds tension every minute, every second until it feels like it's going to explode. The performances are magnificent, the settings are beautiful, and the twist, although nothing new, feels new, and it does such a great job of turning the narrative completely around that you feel like you have to watch The Others just to see how the knowledge of what is really going on not only recontextualizes the story, but the characters and the setting as well. Plus, this story is very scary. The Others is a magnificent and unnerving old-fashioned ghost story that I feel just isn't getting its due anymore. Sure, it starts slow, but that is all in the design. And if you are one of the wimps who says, "I couldn't make a half-hour into this movie," then, well, you are weak and you won't survive the winter. The Others! A true modern-day horror masterpiece, and the latest addition to our 31 spooky movies of Halloween. This is Terrifier 2 on our 31 spooky movies of Halloween. Did you like Hostel, Saw, or The Human Centipede, but thought to yourself, man, these movies have way too much nuance and restraint. If only they could be more sadistic. Well, if this is you, I'm calling the police. But while we're waiting for the police to get here and file their reports, I'll tell you about Terrifier 2 because it is no doubt up your alley. You sicko. In this sequel to the original that I covered last year, Art the Clown is back. Because of course he is. And he goes on another killing spree. Because of course he does. Okay, say something nice. Art the Clown is menacing. He looks evil, otherworldly, and David Howard Thornton's silent performance makes him truly sinister and barbarous. To be frank, he deserves to be in a better movie. Even though I found it to be mean-spirited and cruel, I sort of liked the first Terrifier because I found the pointless brutality of Art the Clown, a monster who did not care about revenge or motivation to do his evil deeds, to be the scariest thing. He just killed to kill. It didn't matter who you were, it didn't matter what you were doing, it didn't matter what kind of person you were. It's the same reason why The Strangers was so frightening. Why are you doing this? Because you were home. Terrifier 2, however, takes things that barely worked the first time and chucks it right into the garbage. Terrifier 2 is an unpleasant, unlikable experience that tries to appeal to the gore hounds that made the first movie so successful, and you can definitely tell that this movie has a higher budget to spend on makeup, gore, locations, actors, gore, costumes, gore, and the like. The problem is, Terrifier 2 is boring. It doesn't even have the decency to be bad. It's just a dull slog, interrupted by moments of depravity and disgusting delight, where characters are in trouble and they try to crawl away from the bad guy instead of just getting up and running away, because that would be a lot faster. As I said, I think that Art the Clown and the Pale Girl are amazingly designed and acted villains, and they deserve to be in a movie. Better. Not a movie that sets out to pander to a niche audience, because that's what this movie feels like. It feels like edgelords pandering to other edgelords. Even placing the final act at a spooky carnival elicited more yawns than screams. And that's the worst part, really. This movie just isn't scary. Despite the fact that Art looks terrifying, this movie never is. It doesn't even have any decent jump scares. It's just a succession of, meet this character, Art kills this character, Art plays with the body, over and over and over again. No surprises, no shocks, just blood and boredom. It's just dumb. It's not fun dumb, just dumb. And boring, which is a shame because even with minor effort, it could be something better, especially with such a great antagonist, but it just seems like nobody cares about that. They just wanted to pour more blood on top of it. Blood is never a substitute for a good, fun, dumb slasher movie. And this movie's just not fun. It didn't appeal to me, but who knows? Maybe if you relish blasts of sadism and cruelty sandwiched between tedious character moments, you'll add it to your list of 31 spooky movies of Halloween. But I won't. This is Rabid Grannies. Rabid Grannies? On our 31 spooky movies of Halloween. 2 English grandmothers are sent a gift from the satanic estranged black sheep of the family for their birthday party, which transforms them into a couple of demons that proceed to hack and slash their way through their spoiled, greedy relatives. Oh, it is way past time that I did a trauma movie, so why not the most infamous and weird? Rabid Grannies is just as bonkers as it sounds. An unhinged romp of a movie with that bargain basement trauma charm that never stops having fun with its premise. Is it a good movie? No. It's a trauma movie, which blurs the line between what is bad and what is entertaining. Undoubtedly, Rabid Grannies is a bad movie, but it's a fun bad movie and has unexpected bursts of cleverness.
I was particularly surprised by a scene where the grannies tormented a cowardly priest by offering him a choice between being painfully tortured by them or committing suicide, which according to his beliefs would send his soul to hell. I'm sorry, but who told this movie about two demon-possessed cannibal grandmothers it could be that clever? Unfortunately, Rabid Grannies falls victim to its own low budget and ends with a whimper and not the bang it deserved, which, given that it's trauma, I kind of expected. But I will say again, despite the fact that this is a bad movie, it's a fun bad movie, and I had a blast watching it. This is why a movie like Rabid Grannies succeeds, where a movie like Terrifier 2 fails. Both movies are sadistic and gory, but Rabid Grannies celebrates the ridiculousness of its premise and the joy of its badness, where Terrifier doesn't understand that simple formula and just dumps blood and body parts on everyone thinking that that's enough. I mean, come on. If a trauma movie can do this, it can't be that hard. All the same, Rabid Grannies is a decadent, devilish delight, a geriatric, jolly, goofy gore fest of glorious greatness, completely unbothered with being grounded or being decent. It's ridiculous enough to get away with it, and it does. It does get away with it. And this is why Rabid Grannies has earned its spot on our 31 spooky movies of Halloween. This is Warlock on our 31 spooky movies of Halloween. You know, when I was a kid, this guy came to our school to warn us about the evils of Satanism. This was right in the middle of the satanic panic of the 1980s, and he talked about this movie in particular. It was about to open up in theaters, and he said to us that it was demonic, and going to watch it was like worshiping the devil. So of course, I had to see this movie as soon as I could. I mean, it wouldn't be for years until it came out on VHS. So what was it like? It's a weird one. It's a road movie where a man from the 17th century teams up with a gal from the 20th century, and both embark on a quest to stop a warlock from learning the true name of God and saying it backwards to unmake the universe. Wait. Does this mean that God has the same weakness as Mr. Mxyzptlk? God is a Superman villain. Warlock isn't a scary movie, but it's a good movie nonetheless. More action and fantasy than anything else, and an enjoyable fish-out-of-water story with Richard Grant being a fun hero character, magnificently out of his depth, and Julian Sands playing the warlock with gleeful, delicious bravado. Also, Laurie Singer is there. Now, it does get hokey in places, and some of the story beats are rather contrived. There is a particularly amusing action scene where Laurie Singer chases a very slow-moving train, and it's shot so dramatically and over the top and goes on for so long that it's hysterical. I mean, come on, the train was moving like 3 miles an hour. I also have to address the Laurie Singer-shaped elephant in the room. She's really bad in this movie. I don't really think it's her fault because her character is written to be annoying, but during a sequence where she's turned old during a curse, it's Razzie-worthy. She plays it like somebody making fun of the elderly, and the fact that the makeup is very lazy doesn't help either. There's also some pretty, let's just call it, problematic terminology used in this movie that, through today's lens, comes off as very cringy, even though in 1989 it was seen as progressive. Really? Time changes stuff. There you go. I watched Warlock and didn't lose my soul to Satan. It turns out
I was born without one.
Warlock. It isn't scary, but it's a fun ride and an excellent change of pace for our 31 spooky movies of Halloween. This is Witchboard, requested by our friend Aaron Sugar on our 31 spooky movies of Halloween. Witchboard tells another cautionary tale of why Ouija boards are bad and will destroy your life and kill everyone around you. An interesting holdover from the satanic panic of the 1980s. They were selling these boards in Kmart, you know. I mean, they literally buy a new one in this movie at one point. Doors to Evil, on sale in every toy aisle in America. Why were there no more Ouija incidents than there actually were? Seems to me these stupid kids would be calling up demons every other weekend. In this film, a woman is introduced to a Ouija board at a party and begins contacting the friendly ghost of a little boy named David. Only it's not a little boy, it's evil! And now her boyfriend and her ex must set aside their differences and save her from this sinister supernatural entity. The best thing I can say about Witchboard is that it is not good. But it is charming and goofy and ultimately a very fun time, despite the film taking itself way too seriously. Witchboard is the equivalent of a bad American Idol audition who thinks that they're a good American Idol audition, and that when someone comes up to them and says, "Wow, I really loved your audition," they think that they're a good singer. But Witchboard is not a good singer or a good movie. Much of it is incompetently assembled and executed to the point that much of the horror is lost strictly to ineptitude. For example, most of this film takes place in broad daylight, which, for a movie about contacting the spirits of the dead, is an odd choice. Plus, there's a subplot about the boyfriend and his partner's ex, former friends trying to save the woman that they love, and, well, it comes off a bit, let's just say, different than the filmmakers intended it to. Let's be honest, these two guys have far more chemistry than the main couple. There's also a medium in this movie who is an extra large when it comes to being one of the most annoying characters in a horror movie in cinematic history. And that includes Fred. Minor spoilers, but I don't think that anyone in theaters or at home were sad when this particular character got canked. All in all, Witchboard is an average, low-budget 80s horror movie with low ambitions, but achieves unintentional moments of hilarity despite itself. Characters are constantly attacked by the cameraman, the writer's substitute being a jackass for charm, and the writing is so horrendous that it loops back into being genius when the actors say the words out loud. It all culminates in a climax that is so accidentally ludicrous that it is one of the funniest slow-motion falls I've seen in a horror movie, or any movie, in a long, long time. It's like they tried to emulate Sam Raimi, but had no idea how to. Also, can my non-existent producer put up the movie poster right here, please? Who's this? He never appears in the movie. Was there a post-credit scene that I skipped? Witchboard will return. Of course it will. Apparently, there are numerous sequels. Damn you, Aaron. Now I will have to watch them and hope that they are this funny. Witchboard! It's not going to scare you, but you're going to have a great time watching this nostalgic piece of 80s schlock and laughing at everything that went wrong with it. But it's laughter that comes from a place of love. And there will be a lot of it. And that is why Witchboard belongs on this list of 31 spooky movies of Halloween. It's the adventures of Mark Twain. On our 31 spooky movies of Halloween? Okay, I'm cheating a little bit for this one, but if you remember my list from last year, I lamented a couple of times that I think it's terrible, at least in American animation, that there's so very little animated horror when it would lend itself very well to the genre. Take, for example, The Adventures of Mark Twain, a claymation movie from the creators of the California Raisins. This movie is decidedly not a horror movie, despite the disturbingly uncanny appearance of many of the characters. Ugh. And it is an imaginative family film celebrating one of the United States' most famous authors. And then, right in the middle of the movie, things turn decidedly dark as Tom Sawyer, Huck Finn, and Becky Thatcher meet the mysterious stranger. It comes virtually out of nowhere. The mysterious stranger identifies themselves as an angel named Satan, who gives the children their favorite things to eat and greets them warmly and with magic before creating life in the form of a miniature civilization for them, and then proceeds to visit pain and misery on its tiny inhabitants. The sequence, though short in the scope of the film, is the one thing that many people who saw this movie remember about this film. The design of the mysterious stranger is incredible. An empty, amorphous mask, the genderless voice that never wavers or shows emotion, save for the horrifying flashes on the mask itself. The mysterious stranger, if they are the devil, is probably the most original and chilling interpretations of Satan I have ever seen. And this is a kids' movie! So many things contribute to the horror of this sequence. The mysterious stranger, their actions, and the cries of the tiny civilization, and Tom, Huck, and Becky's horrified reactions as they watch helplessly, completely off guard and out of their element, every bit as much as we, the audience, are at this point. This single sequence in the middle of this family-friendly stop-motion cartoon is the purest horror, and as with many children in the 1980s, the very first we were exposed to. It is only a 6-minute segment in this 90-minute movie, but it has cemented the adventures of Mark Twain as an unusual but worthy addition to our 31 spooky movies of Halloween. This is The Innocents on our 31 spooky movies of Halloween. Thank you to Jenny Smith 6302 for recommending this film, which I had actually never heard of before, but she said if you liked the others, you would like this film, and you know what? You were right. I did like the others, and I did like this film. The Innocents is a movie about a governess who is hired to take care of 2 children at a large estate, but as she gets to know her 2 charges, she realizes something is not quite right, and that the children might be possessed by the ghosts of 2 former servants. The movie is beautiful, simple, atmospheric, and smothering, even in scenes of broad daylight. The nighttime scenes seem to swim in the blackest black, reflections, shadows, and sprawling compositions. This is a movie that looks amazing and just a little off and distorted. Nothing in this film looks quite right, and it only makes the disturbing nature of this film even more disturbing in ways you did not even realize. And yes, it is disturbing. While you may think that The Innocents is a melodrama period piece about a haunted house, watching it from beginning to end forces you to consider if it actually is. Is this a ghost story, or is it a story about a disturbed woman who is slowly losing her grip on sanity? What is more frightening, the specter of possession, or the cold permanence of reality and a fractured mind? Honestly, the movie works both ways, and I find that absolutely chilling. Furthermore, there are no weak links in the cast. Every character is interesting and full of life. Even the child actors play their part with vigor and commitment and chilling coldness. This movie is great. While it can become too dialogue heavy, a holdover from the stage production it's adapted from, it is beautiful, has some very chilling scares, and a sinister tone that will have you questioning what you just watched. The Innocents is a classic and belongs on our list of 31 spooky movies of Halloween. This is Tourist Trap on our 31 spooky movies of Halloween. Are you scared of mannequins? If you are, you should probably think twice about watching Tourist Trap. And if you're not afraid of mannequins, you should probably think twice before watching Tourist Trap, because it is really bad.
But if it's bad, why did you watch it?
When I watch movies for my 31 spooky movies of Halloween, I come across them by either going down rabbit holes on Tubi, or having people like you suggest them to me, or finding lists of criminally underrated horror movies that very few people have ever heard of. That's how I came across Tourist Trap. It was a criminally underrated movie that no one had ever heard of, at least as far as this list said, and now I'm beginning to wonder who wrote this list, because obviously there's something wrong with them. Tourist Trap is a classic example of 70s trash horror. A simple premise stretched out over 90 minutes, even though it really only had legs for 45. In it, a group of young people come across a rundown wax museum tourist trap in the middle of nowhere, run by a creepy old man who invites them to stay when they get into a bit of car trouble. But as the night wears on, it becomes more than obvious that something is rotten at the old wax museum. The absolute jewel of this movie is the legendary Western star Chuck Connors of The Rifleman, playing in this bargain basement schlockfest. At least, he looks like he's having a good time despite the fact that he gives an unironically bad performance. Who knows? Maybe he needed the money. I mean, we've all been there. But the presence of a largely uncommitted Chuck Connors leads to many unintentional moments of sheer hilarity, including a couple of idiot kids trying to figure out the identity of a masked killer with Chuck Connors' voice. Gee, I wonder who the killer might be. And man, are the victims in this movie stupid. Which is good, because the villain in this movie is stupid. And the script is stupid. And the movie is stupid. And I was stupid for watching it. Tourist Trap is the kind of movie that other movies have been making fun of for years. A turkey stuffed full of cliches and dialogue that is far too wordy that it has the capability to support its absolutely eye-rolling stuff. Now, there are a couple of good jump scares, and a few of the mannequins look somewhat disturbing, even though the movie keeps calling them wax dummies. But they're not wax dummies, they're obviously mannequins. Why does this movie not know the difference between a wax dummy and a mannequin? Will somebody please explain that to me? So Tourist Trap is, it's bad. It's not even bad enough to be good, it's just bad. It's a plotting, petrified pile of stereotypes, moronic characters, and an insane shoestring of a plot. All of this I could excuse if the movie was even a little bit interesting, but it's not. It's just boring. Stupefyingly boring. Even if you're a gorehound with low standards looking for some interesting kills or splattering body parts, you're going to be disappointed, because Tourist Trap is rated PG, which makes this movie about as cutting and daring as a Disney Channel original movie. I understand that some people see this as a classic, and I would say that I understand why, but I don't. What is the appeal here? Explain it to me, slowly. Use tiny words, use sock puppets, make me get why you think this movie is anything other than a steaming pile of who knows. Maybe you'll like it more than I did, because I certainly couldn't have liked it less. And if you did, you can add it to your list of 31 spooky movies of Halloween, because I won't. This is where, on our 31 spooky movies of Halloween, I won't do that again. Yes, where, as in, where did the last 90 minutes of my life go? Where is a found footage narrative hybrid about a grisly murder in the French countryside, and how a lawyer and her team defend the man named Talon, who the police say is responsible, who is either a werewolf or just a big sickly man who wants his mommy and a little sympathy from those who have disrespected him and his family for generations. What's that? He killed how many people? And he did what to a little boy? Ow. I'm just going to say it. This movie would have worked a lot better as a 100% found footage horror movie, or at least a mockumentary. As it is now, Where starts out in a very interesting place as an investigative mystery, and it works until the moment that we learn that the man in question, spoiler alert, is actually a werewolf. And then it treads awkwardly down the path that countless other werewolf movies have trod before, ditching the found footage aesthetic for something more narrative, uninspired, and dull. The grainy and unpolished look giving way to something more detailed and in-depth, which does nothing but expose the flaws we didn't see before. And then the movie just gets redonkulous as it devolves into two werewolves duking it out in the countryside for a climax that is neither exciting or daring, just dumb, cheap, and tacky looking. And it stinks, because Where started out so strong and ended with a resounding thud. Where? More like, where did all of the promise go after the first half hour? To its credit, Brian Scott O'Connor is the best thing about this movie. A hulking behemoth of a man, he plays this part as half dangerous and half sad. Moreover, he strikes me as a man who's just tired. He's tired of it all, and when he asks for help, you believe him. This is a guy I can get behind. This is a guy we feel bad for. This is a guy we want to root for. This is a guy who... What's that? Oh. He senselessly killed how many people in a hospital? Wow. Well, I guess the movie wanted him to be a straight-up bad guy. Can't sympathize with a beast too much. That's not allowed. Heck, even the suggestion that a bear might have killed the family at the beginning of the movie and not Talon is cast into the darkness of the movie not giving a darn because werewolf bad. I'm just so tired of movies like this starting out with so much promise and dropping it all when they lose their nerve. No movie, we don't want to see the same thing we've seen a million times before. I actually liked the investigation procurial that Where started out as before it became an underworld knockoff. Where? More like, where am I gonna find a good werewolf movie? Am I right? This is getting exhausting. Hopefully I'll trip over something sooner than later, but in the meantime, you can put Where on your list of 31 spooky movies of Halloween, because I'm not doing it. This is Prince of Darkness on our 31 spooky movies of Halloween. Thank you to Samanthas for suggesting this one. A congratulatory ham is in the mail heading your direction, unless I forget or I just don't want to. So, Prince of Darkness. Prince of Darkness is a movie, all right. It involves a priest, played by Donald Pleasance, recruiting a group of scientists to study a sinister, swirling container of green mystery goo that a secretive sect of the Catholic Church has kept hidden in a basement for generations. This green goo, as it turns out, is Satan, or at least what we believe to be Satan, and the signs and portents indicate that it is going to try and summon something even more powerful and evil, the anti-god, which will make things on Earth, you know, bad. No, really, that's the plot. The cast is stacked with well-known character actors and actors that should have been bigger, but weren't. Right on the heels of Big Trouble in Little China, we see both Victor Wong and Dennis Dunn. Donald Pleasance is also there doing his usual great job at everything, and Jesse Lawrence gives a fantastically creepy performance. This guy looks so familiar. Where have I seen him before? Oh, God! There are some gnarly special effects makeup in this film, a really cool idea with a mirror dimension, and some delightful details that were probably born from a lack of budget rather than an abundance of ambition. Having the possessed members of the team just stare rather than attack, and having them look normal rather than a tube of hamburger meat actually looks better in my opinion and leads to more suspense. Special effects are sparse but very neat. I enjoy effects that are simple but effective, the type of effects that you look at and think, oh, I know how they did that, but you still appreciate it. In my mind, Prince of Darkness is a story of ideas that are never properly cultivated. Seeds are planted, they're grown, but then they're neglected and shrivel up and die, like my houseplants or pets do when I go on vacation. The ideas in this movie are interesting and somewhat scandalous. The idea that Satan actually came first and God was created as a countermeasure. The idea that Jesus was an alien who came to warn us but was killed because he was essentially seen as a cult leader. And the idea that the future is trying to communicate with us through our dreams are all fascinating ideas that this movie does absolutely nothing with. The earth under Prince of Darkness is littered with unfired Chekhov's guns, as if John Carpenter went from idea to idea saying, wouldn't it be neat if, wouldn't it be cool if, wouldn't it be awesome if this happened? And then moved on to another concept when his ADHD meds wore off. Worse still, this movie is content to philosophize science and religion together in a way no one considered or even asked for. The result being a movie that is so far up its own keister that it might find lemmiwinks and a script for Ghosts of Mars. The first 45 minutes of this movie are pretty good, I will admit. It is dripping with foreboding and inevitability as minor things become major, and we're introduced to the problem facing these characters and the world in general. The problem is, it doesn't last, and once the devil goo begins squirting people like an unholy super soaker, it really goes downhill. Simply put, Prince of Darkness commits the cardinal sin of horror. It's boring, and the boring is all-consuming. Members of the cast who are supposed to be romantically involved barely have any chemistry between them. The main lead is shattered at one point because a woman he had a single one-night stand with and otherwise barely knew dies. Was there a lot of stuff happening off-screen or something? Did the scenes get cut? Why did this matter so much to him? I was not impressed. I know this movie has a large cult following, and I'm probably about to be crucified like Alien Jesus was, but I just did not care for it. Sitting through Prince of Darkness was a chore, and a mostly unpleasant one at that, because sitting through a boring movie is bad enough, but sitting through a boring movie that has great ideas that it does nothing with is excruciating. Still, if you're a fan, I'm happy for you. I actually love the idea that others can gather joy and happiness from something that I did not. And as a result, you are more than welcome to add Prince of Darkness to your list of 31 spooky movies of Halloween, because I ain't doing it. This is Blackula on our 31 spooky movies of Halloween. Yes, Blackula, the tale of a 16th century African prince transformed into a vampire by Count Dracula and then resurrected in 1972 Los Angeles, where his thirst for blood and a quest for the woman he loves drives him on a vicious, bloody path through the city. I have to admit, I just love blaxploitation movies, but never really got into the horror side of them. something I am only now just attempting to correct because I've only just discovered the richness of blaxploitation horror, and because of Blackula. It's the stuff of legends, the punchline to countless jokes. I mean, come on, there was a character on the Venture Brothers who made it his entire personality.
Yes, I only hunt Blackulas. Man, I specialize in hunting black vampires. I don't know what the PC name for that is.
And I also remember seeing the VHS box for this movie in Blockbuster whenever I was a kid. I have vivid memories of picking it up and thinking, is this real? Is this a real movie? But despite all this, I've never watched Blackula until just yesterday. A large part of me, whenever I watched this movie, was expecting a parody, something along the lines of Airplane or Top Secret. But Blackula was something I was not expecting. Blackula, despite some satirical themes, plays itself off kinda seriously. And I think that was a mistake. After all, if your title is a pun, and your movie isn't a comedy, you've already got some serious disconnect in your theme. I admit, Blackula, it's an amazing pun, and I can understand why the filmmakers didn't want to lose it. But you could have easily called it Black Vampire or African Vampire King, and it would have been honest about the movie's contents. And who wouldn't see a movie called African Vampire King? That's amazing. Someone make that movie now. Forget about the title. How is the movie itself? It's pretty terrible, but it does have its moments. But before I do get into those moments, I do have to talk about the most glaring elephant in the room, and that is that Blackula contains some extreme and needless homophobia, even for 1972, which is saying a lot and very unfortunate. Several times, a pair of characters who are murdered are referred to as a bundle of sticks, if you know what I mean, and it always comes off as callous and cruel, as they are, once again, murder victims, and like so many others, this movie wants you to think that they were less than human and probably deserved it for being gay, which is pretty sick. So already, out of the gate, Blackula is spraying dated sensibilities all over the place like a broccoli and cabbage fart, and it's pretty repugnant. Am I looking at an old movie through contemporary eyes? Yes, I am. Deal with it. Listen, you can excuse a lot of things by saying that a movie is a product of its time, but hatred of this type is still hatred no matter what lens you look at it through. The rest of the movie is very awkwardly executed. Granted, Blackula did not have much of a budget, if any budget at all, but the film looks like it was put together by people who didn't know how to put a movie together. The editing is weird, the action scenes are badly choreographed, and several performances are hilariously bad. There's a scene where one of Blackula's victims wakes up in the morgue, and her shrill cries and screams while attacking others were laugh-inducing. I swear this movie should have been a straight-up comedy. It would have been so much better. And yes, I fully realize this movie was most likely put together by people with very little experience, and you know what? It doesn't change the fact that it's still awkward. Okay, now I gotta say the nice things. Despite Blackula's inherent badness, William Marshall, who plays Blackula, has a magnificent stage presence and completely owns every scene he's in, even the bad ones. His imposing voice and his powerful figure gives Blackula his power, and his acting prowess gives Blackula his heart. I was shocked by how much I enjoyed the nuances of his performance in Blackula. And given that this movie is populated by characters who are terrible people to their core, William Marshall actually makes Blackula a guy you have sympathy for. He didn't want to be a vampire, he didn't ask for his fate, and he's lost his wife. You know what, Blackula? You can suck the life out of everyone in this movie if you want to. As a treat. Blackula is bad. I know there are some trains of thought out there that this film is culturally significant, as it is one of the first examples of black horror. But it's important because it was first, not because it was good. And I'm going to tell you right now, this is just my opinion. I'm not about to tell a culture that I'm not a part of what is and is not significant to that culture. In my opinion, this movie was dull, it was silly, and quite terrible in many ways. It's not a comedy, but you will find yourself laughing at it, which, despite my earlier misgivings about some of the more questionable subject matter, makes watching it somewhat fun, and does give this film a type of charm despite itself. But in the end, a lot like its immortal namesake, Blackula sucks. It takes a very interesting premise and does nothing with it but hang on every cliche and stereotype that it can find because apparently it believed that was appropriate at the time. Its star does a magnificent job with what he's given, but he can't save something this hopeless. Blackula is ironically funny, and I do think that anyone who loves a good horror movie or a good blaxploitation movie should check it out at least once as a curiosity. But make no mistake, Blackula is bad. It's a bad movie, and should feel bad. But if you are a fan, I'm happy you find joy in something I did not, and if it pleases you, you can put Blackula on your list of 31 spooky movies of Halloween, because I'm not gonna do it. This is Wishmaster on our 31 spooky movies of Halloween. Wishmaster is a fresh take on the legend of the genie from Wes Craven. In it, an ancient djinn is released on modern-day Los Angeles and begins to grant wishes to anyone he comes across. But this isn't a Robin Williams genie. This is a different type of genie. A genie from Temu. You know, off-brand, disappointing, cheap. Every wish is full of mistranslations, and at least one will give you cancer. If you make all 3 wishes, the djinn will take over the world, which of course begs the question, why hasn't the djinn taken over the world yet? Are you telling me that in all the thousands of years that they've existed, they haven't found anyone who was both greedy and stupid? I mean, come on, we found one and made him president, for goodness sakes. But my goodness, what a fun movie. What a fun, stupid movie. This is 90s camp in the best possible way. It's like a hamburger from your favorite burger joint that is so greasy and covered in fat that it turns the paper they serve it to you clear. You know it's bad for you, but your mouth waters with every bite, and as your arteries clog, your waistline expands, the only 2 words you can gasp out of your mouth as you go into cardiac arrest is, worth it. That is what Wishmaster be. Yes, Wishmaster is a burger from the Heart Attack Grill. That's a metaphor I just made, and I happily stand by. So let's talk about exactly what makes Wishmaster bad. The acting, for one, it's pathetic. I have never seen a cadre of more uninvolved, uninterested actors in my entire life, and that's counting people like Robert Englund, who honestly looks like he just rolled out of bed to say some lines as a favor to Wes Craven without even reading the script or knowing what he was supposed to be doing in the first place. The lead of the movie, Tammy Lauren, is horrendous. Her line readings are feeble at best and eardrum destroying at worst. A wildly uneven roller coaster of unhinged overreacting and senseless banality where she seems almost bored by the murderous supernatural shenanigans that are happening around her. This performance is fascinating. It goes from bad to worse and then right back around to captivating because you just want to know what strange choice the actress is going to do next. I would have loved to have been on that set just to hear her thoughts on this role. Thankfully, the bad acting does not completely sink Wishmaster. No, the acting is completely overshadowed by the horrendous special effects. Do you remember late 90s CGI special effects? The stuff of Spawn or An American Werewolf in Paris, where the special effect didn't even look like it was part of the movie, but rather a moving sticker that someone just put on the film. My goodness, I can't believe that there was a time that we looked at those types of special effects and thought, wow, that is the future of cinema. Of course, those special effects haven't aged very well. They've aged about as well as an organically grown banana on a hot dashboard. These low-resolution, poorly composited, and completely out-of-place special effects were put into movies not because they were needed, and not because they looked good, because God knows they didn't. They were put there because studios wanted to show off. It was that age where movies were using CGI not because it was the best choice, but because it was considered cutting edge and they wanted to chest thump and get butts into seats no matter how terrible it made their movies look. Hey kids, look how modern and cool we look! Practical special effects? Those were so last year. PlayStation 2 cutscenes are what you want! Spoiler alert, it was not, in fact, what we wanted. So what saves Wishmaster? What keeps this movie from becoming a forgotten train wreck? Andrew freaking Divoff. The man, the myth, the legend, nay, the god who plays the Djinn, single-handedly saved this movie, and I really hope Wes Craven bought him a lobster dinner as a thank you. Heck, I hope Craven bought him an aquarium filled with lobsters, because he deserved it. Divoff plays the part of the Djinn with delectable abandon, giving us a villain who is not only fun to watch, but also a villain who has a genuine good time doing what he does. The Djinn is every bit as fun as Freddy Krueger in some sequences, and in others, when he's getting used to the modern world of 26 years ago. It was really quite a treat to see him involved, tragically briefly, in a horror movie where the villain was the fish out of water. If I had a wish, it would be that the movie would have explored that further. Wishmaster does have a lot of fun with its premise, and let's be honest, in a time where the silver screen was crammed full of teenage-dominated vanilla PG-13 rated slasher movies, Wishmaster offered something unique and different, something, dare I say, high concept and daring. It wasn't completely successful, but it was still a lot of fun to watch. Not high entertainment, but entertainment nonetheless. And I certainly don't regret giving this forgotten gem plucked from the debris of a shattered statue and ready to ruin your world a brand new look. Also, keep an eye out for the horror movie star cameos because there are a bunch. If you want something a little different in your horror movie watch list, I suggest you make your wish come true with Wishmaster, a magical addition to our 31 spooky movies of Halloween. It's Night of the Demons on our 31 spooky movies of Halloween. 10 of the most annoying and irritating creatures in the known universe get together to party on Halloween night in an old funeral home, and while there, and because of course they do, they awaken demons who possess them and go on a murderous rampage. Night of the Demons, it's a weird one. It's complete camp with men and women in their late 20s and early 30s playing teenagers with dialogue that sounds like it was written by a 60-year-old man who's never met an actual teenager in his life and still thinks it's 1954. This movie is pure schlock in its most refined form and contains everything about 80s horror movies that made 80s horror movies so great. Everything from unnecessary salaciousness to extravagant gore, and in that respect, Night of the Demons is a success in what it starts out as. It sets the bar low and limbos. That is, if you can get through the first hour, which is really just an hour of setup and terrible characters saying terrible dialogue. If you can soldier through and get to the third act, it really does eventually turn into a lot of fun. You can approach this movie through two trains of thought. Either it's a horror movie or it's a party movie. Now, personally, I prefer to think of it as a party movie, and it's a party movie with a cast, well, almost too big for it to handle. When this cast loses the terrible music they were dancing to, they decide to hold a seance, which is where the demons come into the picture, through an unexpectedly great and effective practical puppet. I'm not gonna lie, this thing looks sick. From here on out, Night of the Demons borrows very heavily from better movies like Evil Dead to put an ignoble end to its bloated cast of characters. There isn't a lot of originality to be found in this movie, but if you come to a movie like Night of the Demons expecting originality, then you are indeed a fool on an errand. This movie is not good, but I think that Night of the Demons knows it's not good and has made peace with that, and to be honest, I kind of respect that. It doesn't pretend to be doing anything greater than what it does. It just tells its simple and derivative story without any complicated twists or turns and no unnecessary character moments once the story gets going. As I said, it takes a while for that to happen as the movie spends an excruciating amount of time setting up its protagonist and the locations, but once it does, it gets the job done, and it gets it done really well. The makeup and gore effects are cheap but effective and screams 80s horror. Honestly, I think that's what I enjoy most about Night of the Demons. It's a lovely and perverse time capsule of 80s horror tropes where nudity equals violence and sex means you're gonna die. This is the stuff that I live to laugh at, and for that reason, I just can't hate this movie too much. I also have to say how much I appreciated that Night of the Demons used an actual goth song for the goth dance and not just metal. It was a nice touch, it was not lost on me. And so, if you like a little ultra-violence and a whole lot of gore, perhaps you should give Night of the Demons a look and make it one of your 31 spooky movies of Halloween. This is House 2, the second story on our 31 spooky movies of Halloween. First off, A+ for that title. Truly inspired, and it works on both levels. The original House is a classic, a movie that few people seem to know about these days, that takes the haunted house movie and turns it into an experience that will make you laugh your posterior off 1 minute and then scream your face off the next. It's a virtual cornucopia of scares, neat ideas, likable characters, creepy makeup, and wonderful special effects. And then we have House 2, which makes some unexpected choices, but ends up unique unto itself. A movie where you actually don't have to watch Part 1 to understand and enjoy Part 2, and while some may see this as a disappointment, as they wanted to continue the paranormal adventures of Roger Cobb, which, honestly, did we? Did you see House 4? I see this movie as an exciting new chapter in a film series that wanted to establish itself as an anthology before being dragged back to a disappointing direct sequel, which is frustrating. I think Halloween knows what I'm talking about, don't you, buddy? Yeah, you do. Stupid audience pressure. You people killed The Rise of Skywalker, you know. House 2 follows Jesse and Charlie, a pair of yuppies. Oh my gosh, I love the 80s. Who move into a mansion that has been in Jesse's family for generations and where his parents were murdered, which is probably not a good sign. While there, they discover that Jesse's great-great-grandfather is buried with a priceless crystal Aztec skull and decide to dig up his body, which is a totally normal thing to do. It's then that they discover that Gramps isn't quite dead, and that an evil, mysterious force is at play that splits the mansion across time and space. I told you this was a dramatic departure. So, how does House 2 stack up against its predecessor that I crowed about last Halloween? Not well. I'm afraid. Listen, by itself, House 2 is not a bad movie. It's a silly action-adventure fantasy comedy, and it's more than adequate. And Royal Dano is just so darn enjoyable and endearing as Gramps, a character who is actually one of my favorite zombies of all time. I mean, he's right up there with Tarman. That is high praise. The problem comes from the fact that the movie is a fantasy action-adventure comedy and not a horror movie. I wouldn't call it a complete change of genre, as the first movie was a horror comedy as well, but it seems to drop the horror element, or at least diminish it altogether, which is very disappointing. Where House playfully danced the line separating comedy from horror and managed to do it very well, House 2 falls right onto the comedy side without hesitation or apology. In many ways, this actually feels like a family film at times, like Labyrinth. I mean, for goodness sakes, there's a cowboy zombie and a caterpillar Muppet. This movie had no intention of being scary, the result being a movie that works as a goofy adventure, but never succeeds in being anything more than forgettable matinee fluff. Plus, let's not forget there was an entire army of fans of the first movie who went into this one thinking that they were going to get a film on the same level as the first House, only to be seriously disappointed, and then spread the word of mouth that House 2 wasn't worth seeing. House 2 is really not aware enough to be a parody, and it's not smart enough to be a satire, and so it's just silly. It does take a kitchen sink approach in throwing everything against the wall to see what sticks, only to discover, much to its horror, that the wall is made of Teflon. It's just too much of a contrast. Now, while House 2 is imaginative and does go places with its story and climax that I wasn't expecting, and good for them, by the way, it's nowhere near as well written or executed as the original, and even though it has the ambition, it doesn't have the means to reach those ambitions. I'm just gonna say it again, even though it sounds like I'm trashing this movie, I'm really not. I enjoyed it, but I enjoyed it as the silly, stupid action-adventure fantasy that it is, not the silly, stupid action-adventure fantasy horror satire that it rightfully should have been if it was written with more care. Still, if you loved House and want to check out what this movie series could have been if it had been more successful, by all means, join me and add House 2, the second story, to your list of 31 spooky movies of Halloween. But I'm drawing the line at House 3. Nope. Nope, nope, nobody, nope, nope, nope. This is Waxwork on our 31 spooky movies of Halloween. A group of snotty, privileged, horrible, condescending, awful college students are invited by a mysterious man to visit his waxworks one night, and I don't even care what the supernatural hook is. This mysterious man and his waxwork of horrors can have him. I never thought I would say this, but we found a movie that actually has a cast of characters even more insufferable and annoying than the idiots from Night of the Demons. Okay, fine. It turns out that rather than being a boring old wax museum, the Waxworks is a boring old cursed wax museum, where the college students become trapped in the exhibits, get chased by famous monsters of literature in the silver screen, and could end up dead in part of the exhibition, unless, of course, they survive, which is logical, I guess. Waxwork bills itself as a horror comedy, but forgets to be scary, which is fine, I guess. I mean, at least we still have the humor, right? Except we don't. We don't have humor at all. This movie has the exact same plot you would see in a Disney Channel original movie, only the cast is twice as old. Seriously, change nothing except putting the characters in high school and add a song by Selena Gomez, and it's a Disney Channel original. A bad Disney Channel original. I mean, we're talking about Teen Beach Movie, Lemon Mouth, and the live-action Kim Possible bad. But it's not. It's not a Disney Channel original movie. This is a movie made for adults. Made by adults who should have known better, so let's talk about it! Waxwork seems to want to be some kind of horror tribute, putting its victims in werewolf movies, vampire movies, and having them go up against the Marquis de Sade and the like. You know, the greatest monsters that the public domain can offer. But the movie's low budget hampers any attempt to make any of these settings look any more impressive than something you would see on a soap opera. What's worse, the acting in these stupid little vignettes are the stuff of melodramatic community theater where everyone on stage is a prima donna between their shifts at the Circle K. The acting just isn't bad. It's laughably bad, the result of bad readings and bad choices, which is actually one of the few laughs that this horror comedy actually managed to muster. Waxwork is an awkward little film. Not really because of the budget or the inexperience of those behind the curtain, but more because it doesn't know what it wants to be. It's so torn between trying to be scary and trying to be funny that it ends up being neither. It just kind of persists in this continually dull state of existence. If anything, this movie is the depressed man at a party trying to be the fun center of attention, but everyone knows he's in pain and they think it's just sad. Have you ever heard of a horror movie ending in a brawl? Yes, an actual brawl where old men fight movie monsters? Watch Waxwork and you will! Yes, children, that's the climax! A fight between old men and monsters that drags on and becomes sillier and sillier, but paradoxically less and less funny as it goes on. It's just one final dump truck of boring boorishness loaded into your lap at the last minute. Waxwork isn't the least little bitty bit scary. It only manages a few laughs and contains characters who are spoiled, mean, and awful, the kind of characters you're not going to root for. It tries to be self-aware, but only ends up annoying. It tries to be silly, but only comes off as stupid. And what's worse, it wastes a cast containing such legends as Patrick McGee, David Warner, and John Rhys Davies. How do you waste someone like John Rhys Davies in such a boring movie? It should be a crime. That's what it should be. And that's really it. At the end of the day, Waxwork is just a boring movie. Just boring. And out of any sin that a horror movie could make, being boring is the worst. Actually, I guess a Serbian film committed an even worse sin, but we don't talk about that movie. I suppose if you're looking for something so cheesy that a cheetah in sunglasses may harass you for a taste, you can give Waxwork a look and add it to your 31 spooky movies of Halloween. Because I'd rather not. But, you know, you do you. This is Altitude on our 31 spooky movies of Halloween. Altitude tells the story of a group of young people joyriding in a small airplane on their way to a concert, but on the way and in the air, they develop problems when they encounter a strange storm and soon find themselves pursued by an unspeakable evil, which they speak about quite a bit, actually. Why do they call it unspeakable evil if no one will shut up about it? Altitude is tragic. It's tragic like an orphanage fire, or that Arms of an Angel commercial that plays late night on TV, or a plane full of politicians going down in flames, but one seat is empty. It's tragic because it is based on an amazing and original idea that I have never seen before in a film, but it's hampered by a minuscule budget and a general lack of imagination to do anything else original in the movie. I don't mind the fact that the CGI and green screening was janky. I can suspend disbelief enough to look past that if the movie is good enough. But Altitude wants to tell a story of actual cosmic horror, and it doesn't have the means to. The result is a movie that teases us with cosmic horror, gives us a tantalizing taste of cosmic horror, but never delivers the cosmic horror because they just don't have the money. or the talent, or the willingness to do so. I don't blame this movie for not having the funds to present a sky predator that is possibly Cthulhu properly, because it works best with the money that it is given. That would be like blaming me for not living my best life when unchecked capitalism in society has led me to a state of continual poverty and endless, inescapable depression. What I do blame this movie for is taking this amazing and unique premise and vandalizing it with the usual and tired tropes and stock characters that you find in literally every scary movie. Take, for example, the jock. The usually great Jake Weary plays a jock who is literally every bad jock character in every bad movie you've ever seen, and his dialogues and actions are nothing but cliche after cliche after cliche. This is a generic character right off the dollar store shelves whose actions are predictable and eye-rolling, and who in real life would be a social outcast because no one would want to be around such a sociopath. But in the simple black and white world that this altitude movie wants to exist in, his behavior is acceptable because movie. Granted, the jock is the biggest offender, but you also have the weird nerd, the best friend, the strong girl, and the girlfriend with no personality beyond being a girlfriend. These characters are so basic they're standard issue on any base model, and they're so boring they probably think air is spicy. Every moment in this film that does not contain hentai from the sky revolves around mediocre characters saying mediocre things, and it's so dull and uninvolving that even revelations that seem like they should be important are presented with a sigh and received with an indifferent shrug. It's easy to get excited about the premise, but that excitement drains away as soon as anything non-cephalopod takes place, and that's a lot of this movie. What's worse is that major plot points involving the climax are handled clumsily and all but destroy the entire movie. So here we go. Spoiler alert coming in 3, 2, 1. You have been warned. Almost out of nowhere, we learn that the Elder God trying to turn the plane into a Trisket is the result of the imagination of one of the passengers on the plane, and the more fear this person feels, the stronger the sky squid becomes. It's not a bad reveal if it had been handled with greater care and foreshadowing, but it just about comes out of nowhere. Later, this same passenger discovers that they have the ability to change reality and time travel by using his imagination powers, and no, I'm not making that up! This revelation that it was all in the head of a disturbed person takes every bit of wind out of the sails that was weakly propelling the story forward. Seriously, think about this. What is more terrifying? A man whose insecurities are made form? Or an octopus who thinks that airplanes are hors d'oeuvres and is hanging out in the sky somewhere, ready to take planes down with no notice? Because that is freaking terrifying! Again, some of the movie's problems are caused by a lack of budget, but most of them are caused by lame writing and a lack of commitment to the insane premise that this movie introduces us to. Altitude is like a Christmas present that is big and wrapped in pretty paper, but when you open it, it's just an empty box with a gift card to a restaurant that gave you food poisoning the year before. But it's expired anyway, which strangely makes the entire thing even more disappointing. Altitude tries to fly high concept, but crashes and burns. It's disappointing, but the idea is something special. And for that and that alone, I think it does deserve a place on our list of 31 spooky movies of Halloween. This is Haunt on our 31 spooky movies of Halloween. Thank you to good old Uncle Joe for suggesting this movie. Uncle Joe. We all love visiting haunted houses on Halloween, even though they are frequently disappointing experiences where the organizers think that loud and annoying equals scary. No, my friends, Banging a cookie sheet against the wall in rapid succession does not make a haunt scary, and you should bring legal action against the person who told you it did. Haunt is a gloriously simple idea executed with cold efficiency. What if a group of serial killers set up their own haunted house and used it to lure unsuspecting visitors to their grisly demise? The idea alone is so marvelous and so simple, one has to wonder why it's never been used in a wide capacity before. I'm certain it has been used before, but I've never seen it before, and I like it. I like it a lot. This is everything that Escape Room should have been if it wasn't written by complete no-talent hacks. Haunt is the type of movie that stays with me. The ultimate bad thing happening to goodish people type of story where bad guys require no motivation to do the things they do. They do it because they're dangerous and people happen to be available. It's that random brutality that bothers me, and Haunt capitalizes on it beautifully. If only there was one way to combine a random evil movie with a movie about someone being pinned deep in a cave crawl space, it would become my kryptonite and probably send me into some much-needed therapy. This is a taut, efficient thriller with great villains and a suffocating atmosphere. Haunt makes you as an audience member feel every bit as trapped as the victims. The tension is so palpable that I was sure it was going to be captured and tormented next. It was just so good. Haunt is not the most original movie you will ever see, as it definitely has been influenced by the likes of Saw and The Strangers, but I respect how this movie took elements from other movies, put them into a blender, and created something of its own that, while derivative if you think about it for a while, never feels derivative in the moment. It's also a terrific example of how a movie doesn't need an astronomical budget to serve up high-quality scares when there is talent in the writing room and behind the camera. I cannot praise this evil little movie enough. It's a Frankenstein monster of other ideas, but they're assembled in such a good way that the Frankenstein monster has the body of Chris Hemsworth and none of the distracting bolts or scars. Haunt is a terrifically sinister film with a great premise and praiseworthy execution. If you haven't seen it, I encourage you to see it soon, and then add it to your list of 31 spooky movies of Halloween. This is Grave Encounters 2 on our 31 spooky movies of Halloween. If you saw my 31 spooky movies of Halloween last year, you know that I raved about Grave Encounters, as I consider it one of the best found footage movies of all time. This year, I'm looking at the aptly titled Grave Encounters 2, because it's the sequel, the film that dares to stand apart and ask that all-important question, why am I a thing? Set 9 years after the events of the first movie, Grave Encounters 2 follows a young filmmaker who becomes obsessed with the idea that the first Grave Encounters chronicled a real event thanks to a mysterious YouTube commenter. Seriously, what is wrong with you people? This leads him and a group of expendables back to the abandoned psychiatric hospital from the first movie, where the ghosts are ready for a brand new serving of fresh meat. The thing that worked about Grave Encounters was its simplicity. It was just a movie about a fake paranormal television show crew going to film fake paranormal stuff when, much to their surprise, actual ghosts start ruining their night. It was basic, it was simple, and it worked. It didn't need things like lore or meta-commentary. And then Grave Encounters 2 comes along and adds lore and meta-commentary, and the result is the opposite of what Grave Encounters was. Grave Encounters 2 is bloated, lumbering, and stupid. So what went wrong? Well, first of all, this is yet another found footage sequel that posits the idea that the original movie was real and that the protagonists are obsessed with it because it was a culturally phenomenon which is so ridiculously pompous. There are movies far more influential and good than Grave Encounters that had sequels that never had to resort to journeying up their own posteriors because they thought that they were so important. And to be honest, it automatically put me off of this movie because for real, who do they think they are? Secondly, Grave Encounters 2 makes the mistake of inflating its own mythos, which is just not necessary. Although a direct sequel to Grave Encounters was something that I don't think anyone was ever asking for, I do understand the filmmaker's reasons for making one. Money. But a sequel could have been simple as well. Another crew comes to the psychiatric hospital or visits an altogether different location. Would it have been derivative? Yes, but at least it would not have been pretentious, and I will take derivative over pretentious any day. Finally, with all of the extra baggage that the movie gives itself in the lore department, the movie is a lot less streamlined, and it takes, I'm not kidding, 45 minutes to get to anything spooky, scary, or even remotely interesting. The opening act of this film moves at a snail's pace, and the rest of it moves at a stupid pace.
There is actually a part where the ghost picks up the camera and serves as the cameraman, and no, I'm not kidding.
The paranormal part of this movie is a parade of stupid decisions, stupid characters, and stupid creative decisions involving everything from improbable character returns to magic doorways to the desert and more of Grave Encounters engaging in mutual self-gratification because apparently it was just so good. Ironically and tragically, the congratulatory attitude that permeates Grave Encounters 2 is so rank it actually infects your memory of the first movie, which is an absolute shame because it was really good. And so, for the first time, I'm recommending that you do not make Grave Encounters 2 one of your 31 spooky movies of Halloween, because it really is that insufferable. This is El Dia de la Bestia, or the Day of the Beast, on our 31 spooky movies of Halloween. Gracias to Lesser Bliss Heart for recommending this particular pellicula. Just know that my gratitude is fickle and only momentary, which makes it all the more precious. Day of the Beast is an Italian-Spanish endeavor that sees a priest trying to sin as much as humanly possible so that he can trick the devil into buying his soul and revealing the location of the Antichrist, who is fated to be born on Christmas Day. All this so the priest can assassinate him. The baby. The priest is going to assassinate a baby. On the way to assassinate this baby, he meets a Satanist and a charlatan talk show host, and they form an unlikely alliance to stop Armageddon before it begins. I know that a lot of you are probably already put off on the idea of subtitles because as people who actually subscribe to someone like me, you're probably not exactly readers, but I do implore you to give this movie a chance anyway, because this movie is fun. It is shades of This Is the End and Sister Act with just a little pinch of End of Days thrown in for good measure. The result is a very lively horror comedy that sets a momentum that never wavers, and a type of religious comedy that makes fun of it, but never comes off as mean or snide. This is a comedy that could have tried to hurt as many feelings as it wanted to in the name of controversy or being edgy, but chose not to. And I actually respect that it did not go down an easy route. Despite not going for organized religion's throat, Dia de los Bestia is a vicious comedy with a sense of humor as black as the night and every bit as pointed as the sharpest knife. This movie is gloriously macabre in many ways without coming off as desperate or edgelordy. And funny. This movie is hysterical. Watching a priest in full garb walk down the streets, stealing wallets, telling dying homeless people that they're going to burn in hell, and kicking trash cans, all because he wants to sin as much as possible to infiltrate the devil's ranks, had me rolling, and the shenanigans of this father never really stop. I mean, come on, if he really wanted to go to hell so badly, he could have just ran for public office. But that is one of the beauties of this movie. It shows a duality, not only of religion, but also of deified celebrities and Satanists. The Satanist character is your stereotypical fat, drug-addicted man with a filthy mouth who lives with his mother, but when the time comes, he risks life and limb to aid the priest in stopping the real Satan from destroying the world. The celebrity is a liar and vain, but when the time comes, he uses his celebrity to do the right thing and to try to stop an unseemingly unstoppable evil. You have good priests doing bad things for good reasons, and supposedly evil sinners doing good things simply because it's the right thing to do. This movie could have easily been a commentary on religion, but instead it chose to be an optimistic commentary on the human condition, and I find that strangely touching. El Dia de los Bestia is not that scary of a movie, but it does have some frightening parts. The appearance of Satan is very unnerving, and the movie really never loses sight of the terrifying reality that 3 men stand alone against the end of the world. 3 very unqualified men. Honestly, I'm really not sure why this movie hasn't been snapped up by Hollywood for an American remake. I could easily see Seth Rogen or Danny McBride in an American version of Day of the Beast, but in the end, I'm kind of glad they haven't. I really enjoyed the movie as it is, and I'm afraid that any nuance, humor, and optimism that makes this film so special would be lost in translation. And so, espero que agregues El Día de la Bestia a tu lista de 31 películas espeluznante de Halloween. And if you are a Spanish speaker, I am so sorry. This is The Gate 2 on our 31 spooky movies of Halloween. I loved The Gate whenever I was a kid. It's one of my favorite 80s horror movies, and somehow I made it 30 years without knowing that there was a sequel. Why am I never informed about these things? Yes, there is a sequel to The Gate. Not a terrible direct-to-video sequel, but a terrible theatrically released sequel in which Stephen Dorff's little sidekick from the first movie returns and decides to summon demons on purpose this time because it worked out so well. And so Terry's incantation is interrupted by 3 other teens, and he only manages to summon a little 6-inch minion. But the twist is, this minion can grant wishes. And so naturally, the 2 bullies kidnap the little hellspawn for their own self-interest, and Terry, with his father's life on the line, must get the diminutive demon back and send it to hell, where it belongs. So, I'll hand this to The Gate 2. This is not the direction that I expected the sequel to go in, which is both a good thing and a bad thing. Gone is the haunted house aesthetic that worked so well during the first movie. Now the action takes place in multiple settings, many of them outdoors, and many of them in full and direct light. And it just doesn't have the same effect. Imagine Amityville outside of the Amityville house. It would be as boring and unscary as an Amityville movie. Secondly, the tone is all wrong. The Gate 2 goes for a more light-hearted, comedy-centric approach before snapping back to demonic horror, or at least the closest to demonic horror that it can muster. It's a tonal snap so jarring that I think I have whiplash. For example, when it's discovered that the minion can grant wishes, Terry and the girl character, who has no other characterization other than being the love interest, wish for a car. The next morning, the car, well, there's really no delicate way of putting this, the car and everything they wished for literally turns into feces. An interesting premise that the movie never takes advantage of for horror. One of the bullies, for example, has a heart condition and literally says at one point that if he could have a wish, it would be to fix his heart. And I thought, wow, it's gonna be so sad when his heart turns to crap and he dies, but strangely, he never makes the wish to fix his heart. What gives with that? Even at the end, it seems like The Gate 2 is going to bow out with a dark ending in which a major character unexpectedly dies, only for him to pop up out of a coffin at his own funeral like a jack-in-the-box. Wait, was this kid embalmed? Was an autopsy performed? I mean, he did die under mysterious circumstances. Why did this kid come out of the coffin cracking jokes? Shouldn't he have been screaming to return to the sweet embrace of nothingness once again where he could feel no agony? And then 2 other previously dead characters come out of the coffin too. Were they just like hanging out between this guy's legs the whole time? How did all 3 of them fit in there? I have questions that The Gate 2 must answer. Strangely though, I don't hate this movie. I want to, I feel like I need to, and I have every reason to, but The Gate 2 just has this disgusting charm to it that even the unnecessary sequel curse can't crush out. I like the characters. The special effects for being late 80s are still pretty darn impressive, and the supernatural adventure vibe, that really gels with me. Okay, fine. Although it's an unnecessary sequel that literally no one asked for, it's a decent movie on its own. As a sequel to The Gate, it's a Minion wish on the second day, if you know what I mean. But as a standalone horror comedy, it's not bad. I certainly don't regret watching it, and I don't think you would either, so if you can get over the connection to The Gate, you might enjoy it. And so, strangely enough, it is my most extra deepest Hell Minion wish that you put The Gate 2 on your list of 31 spooky movies of Halloween. This is Chud on our 31 spooky movies of Halloween. Chud is a movie I have never seen until today. I've heard jokes about it. I've seen it lurking on streaming, and I saw the videotape box art on shelves back when video stores were still a thing. Heck, I even saw Chud 2, Bud the Chud, but I never saw Chud, and I don't know why. So I thought this was high time to fix that error. In Chud, there is a wave of disappearances among the homeless community, but it doesn't become a serious problem until rich white women start getting eaten by evil monsters from below. So now a determined cop, a photographer, and a minister all seek to bring buried truths to light before more New Yorkers are made into midnight snacks by the cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers. C-H-U-D. Oh! They really reached for that acronym, didn't they? Chud is a procedural investigation into unusual disappearances with more investigation than monsters, and that's really my biggest criticism. The movie seems to want to take swipes at polluters and politicians, but to be frank, it's not smart enough to do that without being as obvious as it is. There's always a singular mustache-twirling bad guy who's dumping toxic waste into the sewers. It's never a corporation, right? So what we are left with is a detective story where we are literally shown the killer in the first scene, and then have to wait 90 minutes for everyone who is investigating to catch up to what we already know. In a way, Chud reminds me of a movie called Q the Winged Serpent, which was also a procedural investigation movie into a man-eating monster, but was done so much better because the investigators weren't complete idiots. In Q, they accept that there is a monster in the first 30 minutes and then proceed to do something about it. Chud is endless denial and cover-ups, and it gets old. Heck, Q showed the monster in the first scene as well, but unlike Chud, the movie isn't about figuring out if there is a monster or if there isn't a monster, which we already know there is. It's about defeating the monster from the get-go, which makes it a much better movie. The true mystery is, why didn't I put Q on this year's list of 31 spooky movies of Halloween? It's because I'm an idiot and I didn't think of doing it. Chud is not a good movie. It's a plodding, boring mess, and when the actual Chuds do finally show up, it's somewhat interesting, but the low production values mean that they appear as articulating masks with glowing eyes, and it never looks good, and it's very obvious that they only have 1 or 2 Chuds that were made. But you don't really think about the 1 or 2 Chuds that they made, because all you're thinking about is how boring this movie is. I understand it's a cult classic, but it must be a really boring cult as far as I'm concerned. It's too obvious to be a satire, and too slow to be exciting. What's worse is these poor-looking monsters aren't scary even when they're hidden in shadow. Chud does boast a very impressive cast, including a very young Daniel Stern, who looks like he's trying to win an Oscar, and it's kind of sad. But the lack of actual Chuds in this movie, especially in a movie called Chud, is a glaring flaw. I don't get why this movie's held in such high regard. It's boring! And as I've said before, I can recommend bad horror movies, but the biggest sin that a horror movie can commit in my book is being boring, and Chud is boring. Chud is a dud in my book, but if you are one of the many people out there who consider it a cult classic for some reason, I'm glad you are reaping joy from something that gave me sorrow. And I give you my blessing, despite myself, to put Chud on your list of 31 spooky movies of Halloween. This is Return of the Living Dead, Part 2, on our 31 spooky movies of Halloween. Set sometime after Return of the Living Dead, the army once again messes up and loses a barrel of pickled zombies that some meddling kids get into and unleash another undead uprising on their small suburban town. Also, James Karen and Tom Matthews are back for, I don't know, some reason. Real talk here, and I don't know, maybe this is a controversial opinion. I think The Return of the Living Dead is one of the best zombie movies ever made. I don't care that it was a horror comedy that shanghaied the term Living Dead to ride off of George Romero's coattails. The movie is a classic with some of the best looking zombies that has ever appeared in motion picture history, capped off by the fact that The Return of the Living Dead made the dead terrifying again by having them run. I'm gonna be honest, if there's a zombie apocalypse and the zombies run, I'm not even gonna bother to survive. I'm just gonna take a seat and let nature take its course. The sequel, aptly titled The Return of the Living Dead, Part 2, takes the humor element and doubles it by reducing horror by 42.4%. You can believe those numbers because of science, and you saw it on YouTube. It is, to be frank, a trade-off. You can be a little funny and a little scary, but it's impossible to be a lot funny and a lot scary at the same time. Return of the Living Dead Part 2 wanted to be a lot funny, but that meant they gave up a lot of its horror. I'm not complaining though, because as I said, Return of the Living Dead was a movie that found a perfect Thanos balance between humor and horror, and to think that a sequel was going to capture that again is just plain foolish. What we have, though, is a sequel that, while inferior, captures the spirit of the original and makes a name for itself in doing so. Granted, some of the humor in this movie is pretty cringy and lacks a lot of the nuance and subtlety of the first film, but Part 2 gleefully goes for being a full-on zombie comedy and becomes so darn goofy and stupid that you can't help but enjoy the ride. I also appreciate how Return of the Living Dead Part 2 differentiates itself from the usual zombie siege movie by having the characters fully mobile for a big part of the movie. You've also got to love how both Return of the Living Dead movies inject so much personality and, if you'll pardon the pun, life into their zombie characters. Not just because they wisecrack in this movie or make fun of Michael Jackson's Thriller, and yes, they totally do, but they take care to make them all visually distinctive and memorable. The downside is that Return of the Living Dead Part 2 loses a lot of its edge by changing the setting to the suburbs. Gone are the 80s punks, and in their place are townies and boring nuclear families. This makes Return of the Living Dead Part 2 quite toothless in many regards, and almost makes it look like they wanted to be a family picture, which is weird. Very weird. I know this movie is hated, both by fans and stars of the first movie and stars of the second movie. I'm looking at you, Tom Matthews. And that's fine. That's fine. They're wrong, but it's fine. In my opinion, Return of the Living Dead Part 2's only cinematic crime is being the sequel to what is arguably a perfect zombie movie, and being a lot less perfect. Let's be honest though. Return of the Living Dead Part 2 is a perfectly adequate movie. It's funny, it's goofy, it's enjoyable, and it is a perfect addition to your 31 spooky movies of Halloween. This is Stung on our 31 spooky movies of Halloween. Stung asks the question that we've all asked ourselves at one point or another. What if a wasp species mutates and becomes an evil, vicious, meat-eating species of giant wasps that gestate inside of human bodies and then decide to attack a party full of millionaires? Fun! That's what happens. I would call this a B movie, but it's about wasps. Low. If you're in the mood for an old-fashioned, tongue-in-cheek monster movie, then my friend, Stung is the movie for you. It is funny, it never takes itself too seriously, and it's got some outstanding gore effects. Do you remember what I said about how wasps gestate inside hosts before erupting out of their bodies like the alien? Well, in Stung, the wasps inadvertently keep a few souvenirs from their hosts that still cling to their bodies. An extremity there, a head here, you know, something to remember them by. This is not only gnarly, but also helps you keep track of which wasp is what. Oh yes! That's what's left of Helen's head. You know, we should keep an eye on that wasp. It's a mean one. Among the many things that I enjoyed about this movie, the thing that I enjoyed the most, I believe, was the tonal shift. If you were to show this film to a friend without telling them what it was about, they would think it was a light-hearted romantic comedy about two caterers and an unrequited crush between them, but then, faster than you can say eat the rich, it becomes a gory, violent horror movie satire that takes swipes against politicians, big pharma, and the parasitic millionaire class. It might give you tonal whiplash, but it hurts so good. If there is one thing I do have to criticize, it is the CGI. Listen, I know this film did not exactly have the highest budget to spend on effects, but the shift between pretty good practical effect puppets and the very low-quality computer-generated wasps is pretty jarring. Lance Hendrickson is in this movie, and the man is just a treasure. He's the only member of the elite that you actually don't want to get seen turned into an insect incubator. At first. And can we please talk about Clifton Collins Jr.? He really is one of the best character actors working today, and he never gets the recognition he deserves because he blends so seamlessly into every role he's in. How terrible is it that you're so good at your job that no one recognizes you? Actually, no. I get it. You know, I really don't see the wasps as the bad guys of this film. I mean, after all, we all screamed eat the rich and they're just complying. They're allies. Stung is a great B movie with so-so effects, but a script and stars that more than make up for it. Does it make a lot of sense sometimes? No. How does a 7-foot wasp gestate inside a human for 30 seconds before hatching? Does it matter? No! Stung is just here to have fun, so don't let it bug you. You'll wince 1 minute and then laugh the next, and it all leads up to an ending that I won't ruin here, but let's just say I was rolling with laughter. Stung is an obscure creature feature that never really got the wide exposure I believe it deserved, but now it can call itself a hidden gem, a gem that you can unearth and add to your treasure chest of 31 spooky movies of Halloween. This is Saturday the 14th on our 31 spooky movies of Halloween. Friday the 13th may be bad, but Saturday the 14th is even worse. At least according to this movie's tagline, and I can tell you, scientifically, that the original Friday the 13th is actually bad. But Saturday the 14th is way worse, if that helps. In this horror comedy, a family is bequeathed a run-down house, and in that house, the little boy discovers an evil book, aptly titled The Book of Evil. And it brings monsters to life if you read out of it. Now, 2 bickering vampires are trying to get in and get their hands on the book, and Van Helsing is on the inside, and he's trying to get his hands on the book as well, and all this is happening in the midst of an owl infestation. The family is just trying to live their best life, except their house is full of monsters. What are you gonna do? This is one of those movies from days gone by that I used to watch all the time as a kid, and then I grew up and just kind of forgot about it, thinking, is this movie actually real, or is this some kind of feverish dream I came up with whenever I had the flu one afternoon? Well, I saw it pop up on Tubi the other day, it unlocked a core memory, and I decided to dive back into Saturday the 14th to see if it was the beloved childhood classic I remembered it as. No. Dear God, no, it is not. Saturday the 14th is stupid. It is a stupid movie, written in a stupid way, directed in a stupid way, and acted in a stupid way. But given the subject matter, I would say that was the correct choice. This is a stupid movie, but Saturday the 14th knows it's a stupid movie. And when it knows it's a stupid movie, it will stand in the face of those who point and hiss, "You're stupid," and it will whisper back, "I know. How can I be stupider?" The result is a movie that is stupid. Charmingly stupid. And I say that with all due reverence and respect. This is a film that knows what it is and has made a Zen-like peace with it, and invites you as an audience member to join them in an ocean of stupid. Just be careful you don't drown. Now that being said, Saturday the 14th is rather uninspired, and there are a lot of jokes that just don't land. Occasionally one does, but when it does, it seems more like an accident than intention. Richard Benjamin, Jeffrey Tambor, and Paula Prentice show shockingly little commitment to this movie, and I'm wondering who blackmailed them into being the stars of something that they obviously cared so little about. Honestly though, can we have a little less family and a little more vampire couple? Their bickering about affairs they had hundreds of years ago was pretty funny, and Jeffrey Tambor not caring and giving all of his line readings in this weird monotone like he just does not care about anything, to me, it made it even funnier. Again, more accident than intentional. I get the feeling watching this film that the target audience was children, but I can't imagine even the most easily entertained children laughing at all the gags in this movie. Oh wait, I laughed at the gags in this movie. Maybe my second grade teacher was right. The vampire hijinks were funny, and some of the monster hijinks were amusing as well, but overall, Saturday the 14th was a painful watch, which is a shame because as a kid, I must have watched this movie like 100 times, but given that we had like 3 channels if the weather was perfect, I guess I wasn't overly picky in those days. Saturday the 14th. It's not funny, it's not scary, and it's stupid. But it knows it's stupid, and in the end, isn't that a win? No. No, it is not. However, if you have low standards and a high threshold of pain, perhaps you will take pity on this lumbering beast and make Saturday the 14th one of your 31 spooky movies of Halloween. This is Oculus on our 31 spooky movies of Halloween. Have you ever seen a movie and a sequel in one package? Because that is what Oculus is. It's like someone wrote a movie and then turned around and wrote a sequel and then left both scripts out only for their cat to happen along and shred both of them into tiny pieces. And then the scriptwriter put the pieces together with Scotch tape and thought, I hope that works. And it does. It does work. Do you remember the magic mirror in Snow White? Well, imagine the magic mirror, only it's crossed with Reagan from The Exorcist and Pinhead from Hellraiser. Oculus is actually nothing like that, so just forget everything I just said. Oculus, not to be confused with the Oculus Rift, which is from Meta, which makes it actually more evil, tells the terrifying tale of how a cursed mirror destroys a family. Part of the film takes place in the past, where the mirror drives the parents into insanity, and the other takes place in the present, where the now grown-up children are dealing with their trauma by destroying the malevolent mirror once and for all. The film switches back and forth between time periods, like Dr. Sam Beckett in the middle of a season finale. Such a thing shouldn't work, but it does, and it does beautifully. What we have here is a film dripping with dread. It forgoes gore and too much violence, opting instead for a more psychological approach to horror, and in my opinion, actually elevates this film and makes it more memorable. Every frame of this movie is so enshrouded in a creeping sense of foreboding that you almost feel suffocated by it. What's more is that one can make the argument that Oculus tells the story of a haunted mirror destroying a family, or Oculus tells the story about how mental illness destroys a family. Are we seeing the result of a paranormal force, or is the family's true curse one from within? Either prospect is haunting and disturbing. Another hallmark of an effective horror movie, in my opinion, puts children at the mercy of forces beyond their control and has them face it alone because adults don't believe them. To me, there's nothing more frightening and no feeling more lonely than being a child and being scared and alone while surrounded by adults who are supposed to protect you. In my opinion, this is why It Chapter 1 was such a great movie while It Chapter 2 was a failure. Chapter 2 lost that most primal, most familiar horrific element that we've all shared, and yes, both movies would have benefited if they'd been combined into one film and jumped back and forth just like the novel did and like Oculus do. I mean, yes, it would have been 5 hours long, but I would have watched it. Oculus is an intimate slow burn and revels in the fear of someone doing something terrible without realizing it. The horrific reality of that act never hitting home until it's too late to take it back. You can argue that Oculus is all about the supernatural, or you can argue about how it's all about mental illness and familial trauma. To me, both aspects are equally frightening. But to form an opinion, you will have to watch, and, to be sure, once you watch Oculus, I have no doubt that you will add it to your list of 31 spooky movies of Halloween. Another hallmark of an effective horror movie, in my opinion, puts children at the mercy of forces beyond their controls and have What? This is Event Horizon, rounding out our 31 spooky movies of Halloween. Happy Halloween, everyone. Space, the final frontier of terror. In space, everyone can hear you scream. A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, it seems that this spaceship, the Event Horizon, was built and had this engine that could open up a wormhole and send the ship anywhere in the known universe in the blink of an eye. However, after activating the engine, the ship and her entire crew vanished and stayed that way for 7 years. After those 7 years, the ship suddenly reappears and a rescue crew is dispatched to recover it and find out what happened to that missing spaceship. However, they soon discover that the ship brought something back with it. Something evil. Do you love haunted house movies? Have you ever thought, hey, you know what would really make this haunted house movie even more terrifying? What if it were in space? And that's what this movie is. This is the Amityville Horror in space. Only unlike an Amityville movie, it's not boring. I mean, come on, the walls actually bleed at one point. You know, this movie is also like Hellraiser in space. You know, a year after Hellraiser actually made it to space. I bet you forgot they actually made a Hellraiser in space movie, didn't you? I know I did. I love Event Horizon with the full and comfortable knowledge that it is an incredibly flawed movie. Yes, I know it has its own collection of stupidities, but I still love it. I know it makes no sense that the ship is orbiting Neptune inside Neptune's atmosphere, and that should have made it light up like a Roman candle and go into a fiery re-entry. But I don't care. I don't care that it doesn't make any sense that a guy got blown up and yet somehow makes his way back to the ship. I don't care. I don't care that there's one room of the ship that the crew keeps getting told not to go into, but they keep going into it anyway. I don't care. If you can forgive these eccentricities in a haunted house movie, you can forgive it in Event Horizon. I don't even care that Cooper is one of the most annoying characters in the history of anything ever, and that the majority of his terrible, annoying lines were dubbed in post to add what an out-of-touch studio executive considered humor. You know, actually, I do hate that. That was just awful. I remember watching this movie in 1997 and absolutely loving it. And then going to a writers' conference a few months later where an entire panel of movie critics named it the worst movie of the year. I was appalled. How dare they? Are they blind? Did they just not see the masterpiece I saw? Event Horizon is a horror triumph, and I love it. It's not deep, it's not philosophical, and it's not trying to say anything. This movie is disturbing, it's frightening, it's unnerving, and it's aggressive about it. You rarely see a movie this aggressive. All it's trying to do is tell a simple story in very simple ways with one of the greatest settings ever constructed in science fiction horror. I, of course, refer to the true star of the show, the Event Horizon herself. This ship on the inside and out looks like an evil Gothic cathedral that should be adorned with gargoyles and presided over by hunchbacks. Evil hunchbacks, not the Disney singing version, but like the really hunchbacks. Simply put, I feared this ship. Good job, Event Horizon. Good job. Not to mention that the cast for this movie is stacked. You got Lawrence Fishburne, you got Sam Neill, you got Jason Isaacs, Sean Pertwee, Kathleen Quinlan, Richard T. Jones, Jack Noseworthy, a veritable who's who of late 90s talent, many of which have become legendary. This movie is stylish, scary, and well-directed, which is amazing considering it was directed by Paul W.S. Anderson, the guy behind all those terrible Resident Evil movies. This movie is his magnum opus. This is the best he ever did and likely will ever do. And I'm not saying that to shame the man. He should be proud. This movie is amazing. While I do love this film almost on a spiritual level, I will be the first to admit that it can be annoyingly over-directed. Mr. Anderson, this is a horror movie, not a rock video. The jump scares are also completely out of control and irritating. I mean, think about this. Do you go up to someone in a completely silent setting, a completely silent and high-tension setting, and say their name as loudly as you can right behind them to get their attention? No, you don't. But the people on Event Horizon do. Okay, this movie is flawed. I'll admit it, but you know what? I still love it. Event Horizon is one of those rare, wonderful, divisive movies that tears friendships apart, starts fistfights, and sparks wars. People either think it's an underrated classic or 90 minutes of pure 200 proof horse manure served on loud silverware. Personally, I fall into the latter, but if you agree, I'd love to hear your opinion so that I may ignore it and continue loving this terrible movie. And so, as the dimensional gate opens and the portal to hell itself awaits, I bid you a blessed Halloween. May your frights be psychological and may your terrors be traumatic. Thank you for joining me once again for another 31 Spooky Movies of Halloween.